This lecture is primarily going to focus on the growth of two European kingdoms, and those are England and France. We're also going to just briefly touch on the Holy Roman Empire, which you see is right next to France there, which is essentially modern day Germany. We'll get to that. A little bit on Italy, which is not anything like a united country at this point. It's very divided. And just for like a second on Russia. So if you're sort of mentally getting your notes ready, it's going to be England, France, Holy Roman Empire, Italy, Russia. We'll start with England. In the year 1066, William of Normandy, sometimes called William the Conqueror, conquered England. He was from Normandy, which is a part of modern day France. You see William up there in the middle in the tapestry. You see right there his face on a coin. Kings would always, and rulers would put their faces on money of the time. And then you see a statue of him, very dramatically in battle right there. He begins to create a sort of a strong centralized nation. Now, England was united before he showed up, but he's really the guy that brings sort of feudalism in all its forms to England. He rewards the knights and everybody that helped him win the Battle of Hastings, that helped him conquer England. He rewards them with land, all throughout the country, and again sets up the sort of feudal pyramid that you're familiar with all throughout England very formally. He also starts a census, like the first census that had been done there or really anywhere in Europe since Roman times. Censuses help governments, again, figure out sort of exactly how many people they have. It helps them make their, taxes more efficient because they sort of know where everybody is. It's a key hallmark of sort of modern bureaucracies. Very, very ancient kingdoms didn't have it, but William of Normandy sees the value in it, so he sort of starts to bring England just into a little bit more of a sort of rational, again, sort of centralized state, which brings some power to the government. A couple hundred years later, in 1215, some of the nobles actually think that the king ends up having too much power. There's a king, a great, descendant of William the Conqueror, King John, who just through this sort of series of events ends up making some of the nobles pretty angry. John has a lot of power, and he, ends up being sort of unpopular for a couple of reasons. The nobles get upset with him, so they, rise up. There's some fighting that happens, and the nobles win. They don't, they don't, throw John out a window. They don't throw him into the ocean. What they do, they sit down with him, like you see in the painting right there, and they make him sign the Magna Carta, which is a very important document. It the Magna Carta lays out the obligations that the king has to the nobles, to the people, and it limits his power. For the first time, it limits the power of the king, and it explicitly states that, okay, you get to be king, but you need to do a couple things. You need to, protect us. You need to, be reasonable. It limits his power again for the very first time. The king is not seen as, oh yeah, you're the king, you're in charge, you can do whatever you want. The Magna Carta puts some limits on him. It's a very, very, very famous document. It influences many future documents, including the Constitution of the United States, that itself is very interested in limiting the power of rulers. Another key governmental innovation of the time was the creation of the English Parliament, which is their lawmaking body, their equivalent of Congress. You see the modern Parliament building right over there, and then underneath that, an illustration of Parliament at the time. Artistry then wasn't quite what it is now. So the lawmaking body of England, Parliament, was originally composed of all the nobles, right? Any lord in all of England was automatically a member. All the bishops, again, those are like the high-ranking members of the church, they're all automatically members. Two knights from every county throughout England, so knights were highly represented, and two people from every town. So you can sort of tell from the structure that the vast majority of people are funneled into that two people from every town thing, and there's an overrepresentation of the rich people, but that's because they're more powerful. Eventually, over time, the nobles and the bishops are going to go into what's called the House of Lords. It's like one half of their thing, and the knights and the people are going to go into the House of Commons, this like other half of their lawmaking body. France during this time is also creating a strong centralized nation. That is to say, a nation where the king is going to have quite a lot of power over the lords, over the nobles. I'll just highlight one guy, which is King Philip the Fair, called the Fair because he was so handsome. He creates the first French Parliament in 1302, so he is doing sort of what England is doing at a pretty similar time. And also, they divide it into three estates, they call it, three classes that have sort of equal power amongst them. That's one being the clergy, so that's, high-ranking religious officials. You see pictures of all these people down there. And then the second, nobles, again, the lords. And then third, the townspeople, which again is the vast majority of the nation, ends up being in the third estate of France, but they only have a third of the votes, but that's the vast majority of the people. They're equally represented with like these two small groups. This again is the sort of the very first time that these two nations try and start creating lawmaking bodies again that sort of look like what Congress looks like today. Their first stabs at it end up giving a lot of weight and a lot of power towards the sort of wealthy elites, and then just a little power to the sort of average Joe. Meanwhile, in Germany and Italy, the nations that were created, the areas there were not nearly so centralized. Essentially, modern day Germany was called the Holy Roman Empire, was the sort of name of it. It had an emperor, but the emperor really didn't have much control over the lords. Essentially, the Holy Roman Empire is like a bunch of different little kingdoms that are pretty independent of one another, that each have a little lord who rules over them. And there's an emperor that's over the whole thing, but again, it's not like he can order them around or make them do much. Italy, on the meantime, is straight up divided. Italy is multiple different countries at this point. Italy is not going to be unified until hundreds upon hundreds of years later, a long, long time later. And Germany also, one of the other things that stops the Holy Roman Empire from being totally unified is this waste a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to conquer Italy. You see that they're called the Holy Roman Empire. They wanted to like be the next Roman Empire. They wanted to unite everybody. They wanted to conquer Italy. They never really could do it, and they waste so much time and energy on it that they just never really are able to get their act together the way that France and England do. Last but not least, Russia. So the very beginnings of Russia are a little interesting. So, some Swedish Vikings. Remember, Vikings are those sort of seafaring people from Scandinavia. Some Swedish Vikings end up going into the sort of area of modern day Ukraine and settling there. They were called the Rus. They migrate there, they settle there, they, mix and mingle and intermarry and everything with the Eastern Europeans that already lived there, and they start this small kingdom around modern day Kiev, which interestingly is actually modern day Ukraine, not modern day Russia. And they're going to grow, it's going to grow and grow and grow. And while there are twists and turns and, the conquerings and stuff that happen between now and then, it's sort of fair to say that that kingdom that they begin grows and grows and grows to eventually become modern day Russia. You can sort of trace the politics and everything of the czars and everyone that you'll learn about next year, all the way back to these guys, sailing up this river and picking a good spot and saying, here's where we're going to settle. That these guys sort of are the forefathers of the modern day country of Russia.